My sister filed a conservatorship petition over our father using a signature he couldn't have signed. He had been dead for 11 days. I found out at the Kansas City BBQ Championship, surrounded by 300 people, and I didn't say a single word to her until the DA's press conference. You were always Dad's favorite anyway, my sister Karen said at the funeral. The least you can do is let me handle the estate. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't know it then, but Karen had already stopped waiting for my answer. I need to write this down because if I don't, I'm going to lose my mind sitting in this hotel room in Kansas City staring at a document that should not exist. Real quick before this gets worse, and trust me it gets worse, if you live for this kind of Reddit chaos, hit subscribe. A like genuinely helps us bring you more of this stuff we're all addicted to. Okay, back to the story. My name is Tom. I'm 41, a general contractor based out of Kansas City, Missouri. I have one sibling, Karen, 46, who lives in Overland Park, about 20 minutes from me. We grew up together, fought like all siblings fight, and spent most of our adult lives in a reasonable détente. Not close. Not enemies. Just two people who shared a father and a childhood and occasionally showed up to the same holidays. Our father, James, died on March 3rd of this year. He was 74. Congestive heart failure. It wasn't sudden, he'd been declining for about 8 months, and we both knew the end was coming. What I didn't know was that Karen had been making plans. Dad was sharp until almost the very end. I want to be clear about that because it matters for what comes later. He had a will, drafted in 2019 with an attorney named Paul Greer, who runs a small estate practice in Leawood. The will was simple, the house and everything in it split equally between Karen and me, his brokerage account split equally, his personal effects to be divided by mutual agreement. Dad was not a complicated man. He drove the same F-150 for 14 years. He owned exactly 2 suits. His most valuable possession was a 1967 Gibson ES-335 guitar that he'd had since he was 19, which he specifically noted in the will should go to me because Karen, quote, can't tell a B-flat from a bad mood. Karen knew about the will. We had both been present when Dad mentioned it at Thanksgiving 2022. She smiled and said that sounded fair. After the funeral, Karen started calling me every few days. She wanted to get ahead of the estate process. She wanted to know if I'd talked to Paul Greer. She wanted to know if I had the account numbers for Dad's brokerage. I answered her questions when I could, told her I'd been busy, which was true, I had 3 active job sites in February, and told her Paul Greer would walk us through everything at the right time. You were always Dad's favorite, she said during one of those calls, the same thing she'd said at the funeral. He left you the guitar. He left me nothing personal. He left you half of a paid-off house, Karen. That's not the same and you know it. I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't. 3 weeks after the funeral, Paul Greer called me. Not to discuss the estate. To ask me a question. Tom, has your sister mentioned anything to you about a conservatorship filing? I set down my coffee mug. A what? Paul was quiet for a second. I received a call this morning from the Jackson County Probate Court. They have a petition on file, filed February 19th, seeking conservatorship over your father's estate and person. The petitioner is Karen. February 19th, 12 days before Dad died. Okay, I said. That's. She filed while he was still alive. Yes. That part isn't unusual, actually. People sometimes file conservatorship petitions for elderly or incapacitated parents. What is unusual? Paul paused. Tom, the petition includes a supporting affidavit. It purports to be signed by your father, dated February 22nd, stating that he was aware of the filing and did not object to it. I did the math without meaning to. Dad died March 3rd. February 22nd was 9 days before he died. Paul, was he lucid on February 22nd? Another pause. Longer this time. Tom, I visited your father on February 20th. He was in hospice care, on a continuous morphine drip. He was not capable of signing a legal document on February 20th, and I have no reason to believe his condition improved by the 22nd. In fact, his hospice nurse has already confirmed to me that he was non-responsive from February 18th forward. The room went very quiet. I could hear my own breathing. So the signature is not his, Paul said. Or if it is, it was obtained under circumstances that would invalidate the document entirely. Either way, we have a serious problem. I didn't yell. I sat there for about 30 seconds with the phone pressed to my ear, looking at the wall of my kitchen, thinking about my father lying in a hospice bed while his daughter practiced his signature. What do we do? I said. First, Paul said, you don't call Karen. Not yet. Let me pull the full filing. And Tom, don't tell her you know. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I called Karen that same afternoon, asked how she was holding up, listened to her talk for 20 minutes about how exhausting the grieving process was, and said nothing. Not a word. That's where I am right now. It's March 28th. I'm in a hotel room in Kansas City because tomorrow is the first day of the American Royal World Series of Barbecue, the big one, the championship event out at the Arrowhead parking lots that runs all weekend. I've been competing in the brisket division for 6 years running. Dad used to drive out and sit in my tent and eat burnt ends and drink one Coors Light very, very slowly, and tell everyone within earshot that his son built the smoker himself. I almost didn't come this year. But Paul told me to act normal. So here I am, acting normal, in a hotel room in Kansas City, knowing what I know. I'll update when there's something to update. Hey. It's been about 2.5 weeks since I posted. A lot has happened. The barbecue championship was surreal. I placed third in brisket, which Dad would have called a moral victory, and then immediately questioned my rub recipe. I spent 2 days at that event talking to competitors and judges and strangers who asked me how my season was going, and I answered every single one of them like a normal person, and the whole time I had a conservatorship petition filed on a dead man's signature sitting in the back of my head like a splinter. Karen showed up on the second day. I hadn't told her I was competing. I never had to, she knew I always competed, and she lives 20 minutes away. She appeared at my tent around noon on Saturday, wearing a white fleece and carrying a pulled pork sandwich from one of the commercial vendors, which, in a competition barbecue setting, is a statement. She smiled and hugged me and asked how I was doing. "Third place so far," I said. "Dad would have loved this," she said. Yeah. She stayed for maybe 45 minutes. We talked about nothing. The weather, the crowds, whether the Chiefs were going to do anything useful with their draft picks. She did not mention the conservatorship. I did not mention the conservatorship. We hugged again when she left, and I watched her walk back toward the parking lot and I thought, you have no idea. But it gets worse. The following Tuesday, Paul called me with the full picture. He'd pulled the complete filing and had a handwriting analyst review the affidavit signature. The result was unambiguous, the signature was not consistent with James Calloway's known exemplars. Paul had collected 4 comparison documents: Dad's 2019 will, a 2021 property tax exemption form, a 2020 vehicle registration, and a birthday card I'd found in his desk drawer addressed to Karen from 2018. The affidavit signature didn't match any of them. It also couldn't match them, because James Calloway was on a morphine drip and non-responsive by February 18th, and the affidavit was dated February 22nd. Paul had done one more thing. He'd contacted Jackson County Probate Court and quietly flagged the petition as potentially fraudulent, providing the hospice records and the handwriting analysis as preliminary evidence. The court froze the conservatorship proceedings pending review. Who does a filing like this get referred to? I asked. In a case with this evidence profile, Paul said carefully, it goes to the DA's office. Economic Crimes Unit. And what do they do with it? They investigate. If the evidence supports charges, they indict. I was quiet for a second. How long does that take? Months. These things move slowly. Tom, I want to be honest with you, this process is not going to feel satisfying in the short term. You need to be patient. I told him I could be patient. I have been a general contractor for 16 years. I have waited 11 months for a permit. I can wait. In the meantime, I had to figure out how to keep acting normal around my sister. That turned out to be easier than I expected, because Karen, apparently operating on the assumption that everything was going smoothly, started making small talk with me about estate timelines. She called me the Thursday after the championship to ask where things stood with Paul Greer. He's still pulling things together, I said. You know how probate can drag. Sure, she said. Just want to make sure we're moving forward. Of course, I said. I'll let you know. What I didn't tell her, Paul Greer was moving forward, just not in the direction she was expecting. There was one more thing I found out that week. Dad's brokerage account, the one that will split equally between us, had a total value of $141,000 at the time of his death. If the conservatorship had gone through before he died, Karen would have had full legal authority over that account and the house. Under Missouri law, a conservator has broad discretion over a ward's assets. She wasn't just trying to control things after his death. She filed while he was still alive, when she thought she'd have time to actually use it. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling for a while. Not angry, exactly. Something colder than anger. That's when I knew what kind of person I was dealing with. Update 2. It's now early June. Almost 3 months since Dad died. I want to walk through what's happened because some of it I'm still processing. First week of May, Paul called to tell me the DA's Economic Crimes Unit had officially opened an investigation. A detective named Sarah Kowalski had been assigned to the case. Paul gave her everything: the hospice records, the handwriting analysis, the comparison exemplars, the probate court filing with its timestamps. Sarah Kowalski called me directly the following week to do an initial interview. She was calm and precise and asked very specific questions. When did Karen first raise the idea of managing the estate? Had I ever heard Karen reference conservatorship before the filing? Did I have any text messages or voicemails that might indicate prior intent? I did, actually. I'd been quietly screenshotting everything since Paul's first call. 3 voicemails from Karen asking about the estate. 6 text exchanges about account numbers and probate timelines. 1 text from February 14th, 2 weeks before Dad died, in which Karen wrote, "I just need to make sure we have legal authority over everything before things get complicated. Can you sign something if I send it?" I had written back, "What kind of thing?" She had written, "Just estate stuff." Paul can explain. I had never followed up, because I'd been on a job site and forgotten about it. Paul had never mentioned it, because Karen hadn't called him. Apparently she decided not to wait for my cooperation. I gave Sarah Kowalski all of it. The 3rd week of May, something unexpected happened. My cousin Rebecca, who is Dad's sister Carol's daughter, called me out of nowhere. Rebecca is 38 and lives in Wichita and had been at the funeral. She'd apparently heard through the family grapevine that there was some kind of legal issue with Dad's estate, and she called me to ask if everything was okay. I was careful. I said there were some complications and that Paul Greer was handling it. Rebecca was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Tom, I don't know if this matters, but Karen called me in February. She asked if I thought your dad was all there mentally. Like, could she get a doctor to say he needed a conservator?" I told her I didn't think that was appropriate and she dropped it. I didn't think much of it at the time. I asked her if she'd be willing to share that with a detective. Rebecca said yes without hesitating. The last week of May, I had a conversation with someone who had become, gradually and unexpectedly, very important to me. Her name is Amy. I'd met her in April through a mutual friend at a housewarming party. She's a structural engineer, 38, funny in a dry way that I find extremely appealing. We'd been getting coffee and then dinner and then more dinners, and at some point in late May I told her what was actually going on with my family. Amy listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a second. "So your sister forged a dead man's signature," she said. "A dying man's signature. He was still technically alive when she filed." "Splitting hairs," Amy said. "My lawyer's hairs to split." She nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" I thought about it. "I need someone who isn't going to tell me to be the bigger person." She looked at me steadily. "I would never tell you that. I don't have a lot of people in my life who understand how I operate." Amy understood it immediately. She started helping me organize the timeline document I'd been building, a clean chronological record of every event, every call, every text, every hospice record date, cross-referenced with the filing timestamps. She's an engineer. She builds things precisely. The document she helped me finish was 41 pages long and had a table of contents. We printed 2 copies on a Saturday afternoon and she handed me mine across her kitchen table like she was handing me a tool. "For whenever you need it," she said. I held on to it. The first week of June, Paul told me the DA's office had finished its investigation phase and was preparing to move forward. He couldn't tell me the exact timing, but he said I should be available and reachable. "It's coming," he said. I asked if I needed to do anything. "Nothing," he said. "That's the point. You don't have to do anything. Let it happen." And so I waited. I went to my job sites. I had dinner with Amy twice. I called my dad's old phone number once by accident, muscle memory, and sat there for 3 seconds listening to the disconnected tone before I hung up. 3 days after Paul's call, everything changed. Karen sent me a text on a Thursday morning asking if I wanted to have lunch and catch up on the estate stuff. She suggested a place near the country club Plaza. Casual. Public. I looked at the text for a long time. Then I called Paul. "She wants to have lunch," I told him. "When?" She suggested Saturday. Paul was quiet. "Tom, I got a call from Sarah Kowalski this morning. The DA is moving forward. The press conference is scheduled for next Friday." Next Friday. 1 week away. Should I go to lunch? "That," Paul said, "is entirely up to you." I thought about my father in that hospice bed. I thought about Karen standing in my barbecue tent with a pulled pork sandwich, smiling, saying Dad would have loved this. I thought about the affidavit with its fake signature, dated 4 days after my father stopped being able to move his own hands. I texted Karen back, sure. Saturday works. Noon. She sent a thumbs-up emoji. I showed up to lunch with the 41-page document in a manila envelope inside my jacket pocket. Amy had suggested that. You might want it close, she said. Not to use. Just to have. Karen was already there when I arrived. She'd ordered sparkling water and was looking at her phone. She looked up and smiled. We ordered. We made small talk. She asked about my job sites. I asked about her kids. She has 2 teenagers, a boy named Jake and a girl named Madison. We ate our food. Then Karen set down her fork and said, so, I've been trying to figure out when probate is going to close. I called Paul last week and he was kind of vague. What's the holdup? I reached into my jacket. I set the manila envelope on the table between us. Karen, I said, I need to ask you something directly. She looked at the envelope. Her face didn't change yet. Okay. Did you file a conservatorship petition over Dad's estate in February? 1 second. 2. Something moved across her face, not guilt, exactly. More like recalibration. Where did you hear that? The Jackson County Probate Court, I said. Where it's on file. She picked up her water glass. Put it down without drinking. It was a protective measure. I wanted to make sure someone had legal authority over his assets if things got complicated quickly. It wasn't a big deal. There's an affidavit in the filing, I said. Dated February 22nd. Signed by Dad. Silence. Dad was non-responsive from February 18th forward. The hospice nurses documented it. His physician documented it. He died March 3rd. I kept my voice level. He couldn't have signed anything on February 22nd. Karen's jaw tightened. Documents get misdated. You know how hospice record-keeping works, people are stressed, things get. Karen. I opened the envelope and slid 3 pages across the table. The handwriting analysis report, the hospice records with the dates highlighted, and the comparison exemplars. This is the handwriting analysis. It's not his signature. You knew it wasn't his signature when you put it there. The couple at the table next to us was talking about something involving their HOA. The restaurant hummed. Karen looked down at the pages. I watched her face change in stages. The recalibration dissolved. Underneath it was something raw, not remorse, but the particular look of a person who realizes the wall they built has a door they didn't know about, and someone else has a key. Tom. I'm not going to discuss this further with you, I said. I put the pages back in the envelope. I wanted you to know that I know. That's all. I paid for both our lunches. I left. I did not look back. In the parking lot I sat in my truck for about 4 minutes. I felt calm. I felt extraordinarily, almost unnervingly calm. Not happy. Not relieved. Just, level. Like a foundation after it cures. I called Amy. It's done, I said. How'd she take it? Badly, I said. But quietly. Good, Amy said. That's the kind of badly that means it landed. Update 3. It's the 3rd week of June, and I promised I'd update when the DA's press conference happened. So here we are. The press conference was held last Friday at 10 a.m. at the Jackson County Courthouse. I found out about it the day before, when Paul Greer called me to give me the time and location. I did not have to attend. The DA's office doesn't require victims to be present at press conferences. But Paul said I could come if I wanted to, and stand at the back, and watch. I asked Amy if she wanted to be there. She said, obviously. We got there early and stood in the back of the courthouse media room. There were maybe a dozen journalists, a camera crew from a local news station, and a handful of people in suits I didn't recognize. Paul was off to one side, hands clasped, watching the podium. The Jackson County DA, a woman named Rebecca Torres, walked to the podium at exactly 10:02. She was brisk and direct. She did not use names I recognized at first. She said, the defendant, but the case description was precise enough that every reporter in the room who'd done even 5 minutes of homework would have the name in 30 seconds. She described a conservatorship petition filed February 19 over the estate and person of a 74-year-old Kansas City resident during the final weeks of his life. She described an affidavit bearing the resident's signature, dated February 22. She described the hospice documentation establishing that the resident was non-responsive from February 18 forward. She described the handwriting analysis. Then she said, the defendant's actions constitute forgery in the first degree under Missouri Statute 570.090 and elder financial exploitation under Statute 570.145. The Jackson County DA's office has filed charges accordingly. An arrest warrant has been issued. She answered 3 questions from reporters. Then she stepped away from the podium. I stood there in the back of that room and felt nothing I expected to feel. No triumph. No grief. A strange, still clarity, like the air after a storm moves through. Amy took my hand without saying anything. Karen was arrested that afternoon. Paul called me while I was driving home from the courthouse to tell me it had happened. She'd been taken from her house in Overland Park at approximately 1:15 p.m. She was processed and released on bond by 6 p.m. Her husband, a guy named Brian who I have always found essentially harmless, apparently didn't come to the station. He sent her attorney instead. The story ran on the local evening news. They didn't use her name on television, she hadn't been convicted, but they described the case in enough detail that anyone in our extended family who was watching would know exactly who they were talking about. My phone started buzzing around 7 p.m. Cousins. An aunt on Dad's side. A woman from Karen's church who had somehow gotten my number. I let all of it go to voicemail and turned my phone face down on the kitchen counter. The one call I picked up was from Rebecca in Wichita. I saw the news, she said. Yeah. Tom, I'm sorry. I know she's your sister. She is, I said. That doesn't change what she did. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Your dad would have been furious. I thought about that. I thought about my father sitting in my barbecue tent in a camping chair, eating burnt ends, telling anyone who'd listen that his son built the smoker himself. I thought about his handwriting on that birthday card from 2018, loopy and a little sideways, the way he always signed his name. Yeah, I said. He would have. Something I want to be clear about, for anyone reading this, I did not call one reporter. I did not post anything publicly about Karen before the arrest. I did not contact her husband or her kids or her church or her friends. I gave my evidence to Paul Greer, who gave it to the court and to the detective, and then I stepped back and let the system do what systems exist to do. Karen's charges were announced by the DA. Not by me. I want that on the record. In the days after the press conference, the secondary consequences came in without any help from me, the way they do. Brian, Karen's husband, moved out of the house in Overland Park 2 weeks after the arrest. I found this out through Rebecca, not directly. Their kids, Jake, who's 16, and Madison, who's 14, went to stay with Brian's parents in Lee Summit while things stabilized. Karen's job, a regional sales management position at a medical supply company, put her on administrative leave pending the outcome of the charges. Paul told me this, because it's a matter of public record. I felt no satisfaction about any of it. I felt relief. Those are different things. The estate, meanwhile, moved forward cleanly. Paul filed a motion to dismiss the conservatorship petition on the grounds of fraudulent filing, which was granted in about 10 days. The will entered probate unchallenged. The house, the brokerage account, Dad's F-150, all of it proceeding exactly as he intended. And the Gibson ES 335 is now sitting in the corner of my living room, next to the windows where the afternoon light hits it. I don't play guitar. I've never played guitar. But Dad had it for 55 years and it's mine now, and sometimes I just sit and look at it and think, okay. The case is pending. Karen has entered a not guilty plea. Her attorney is doing what attorneys do. I don't know how long it will take. I've been told to be patient, and I have learned, over this year, that patience is not passive. Patience is a form of work. It's now 14 months since my father died. Here is where things stand. Karen accepted a plea agreement in November. Forgery in the first degree, reduced from the elder exploitation charge in exchange for full restitution and a suspended sentence with 5 years of probation. She will not go to prison, which I have complicated feelings about that I'm not going to perform for anyone. The important thing is that the record exists. The conviction exists. The court's finding that she forged a dead man's signature on a legal document exists, permanently, in the public record of Jackson County. Her marriage to Brian did not survive. They finalized their divorce in January. I heard through Rebecca that the kids, Jake and Madison, are primarily with Brian now, and that Madison specifically has been very clear with Karen about how she feels about what happened. Madison is 15. She figured out the timeline the way teenagers figure things out now, through court records that are searchable online, and she called her mother from her father's house and asked a direct question, and Karen apparently could not answer it in a way that satisfied a 15-year-old who does not have any reason to protect her mother's feelings. I heard this from Rebecca in March. I did not reach out to Madison or Jake. That is not my place. Something happened in February that I want to mention. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, and when I answered, it was Brian. He said he was sorry. He said he hadn't known what Karen was planning when she filed the petition, which I believe is probably true. Brian has always been, as I said, essentially harmless. He said the kids were struggling and he was trying to hold things together. I listened. I told him I believed he hadn't known. I told him I hoped the kids were okay. Then he said, I know this isn't appropriate, but Karen lost her job last month. The probation conditions require her to pay restitution on a schedule and she's having a hard time. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just wanted you to know. I was quiet for a few seconds. Brian, I said, I'm glad you called. I genuinely hope your kids are okay. But I'm not able to help Karen. He said he understood. We hung up. I sat with that call for a while. It felt like the right answer. It still does. Amy and I are still together. 6 months, which doesn't sound like long but has felt very solid, the way good foundations feel solid, which is to say you don't notice them because they're doing their job. She met Paul Greer at a dinner last month and spent 20 minutes asking him detailed questions about Missouri probate law, which made me want to marry her immediately, though I kept that to myself for now. The estate closed in September. The brokerage account, $141,000, split per the will, was transferred cleanly. Paul sent me a final letter with all the documents and a handwritten note that said, "Your father chose well." I keep that note in the same drawer as Dad's birthday card from 2018, the one with the loopy handwriting they used as a comparison exemplar. The Gibson is still in the corner by the windows. I've started thinking about taking lessons. Karen lost the estate, her marriage, her job, and the trust of her own children. She did it to herself, with a pen and a dead man's signature and the belief that she could move faster than consequences. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about most things. Dad was right about one, I could handle it alone. He just didn't know that handling it would mean handing it to the right people and then getting out of the way. That's the whole job, sometimes. Know what belongs to you, protect it cleanly, and let the record speak.